In this video, I'm going to be finding out what the best lens for a beginner is. Roll titles. Well, hi YouTube, Brian James, our Micro Four Thirds guy with you once again. And one of the most common questions I get asked in the comments to these videos is by people who are new or newish to photography, who want to either choose the very first lens or their first extra lens for their cameras. And they want a bit of advice on that as to what to go for. Now, I have to sit down before I answer these questions and really think about what I want to put across. Do I answer with my head or my heart? If I answer with my heart, then I take it to the point where I'm going to be advising them to go down the route which taught me photography in the first place. A very simplistic route. I didn't have fancy lenses when I was first starting in photography. I had a camera which came with a 50mm f1.8 lens, a prime lens on it. And to get the different shots to zoom in, I had to walk forward. I had to walk towards the subject. To get wide angles, I had to walk quite a distance away. And that was a great grounding because it taught you an awful lot about the photograph itself, the composition of it. And it's still what I would recommend from my heart today. Go off and learn those basics. A lot of cameras these days, we have some fantastic technology and some fantastic ability to take photographs. But I think it masks the real skill underneath, and I think it leaves people frustrated. So if I'm answering with my heart, and I'm going to be talking primarily on this about Micro Four Thirds systems, so any lens values I'm talking about on that. So remember, if you're going for a different format, the lens focal length will be different for what you want. But on Micro Four Thirds format, my ideal choice for anybody as a first lens to replace the kit lens, in addition to the kit lens, but it's also my first choice if I really want people to understand photography, is to go out and buy yourself a 25mm lens, either something like this, which is the Lumix 25mm f1.7, very, very inexpensive, about £150 UK. Or if you can push for the slightly better lens, in my opinion, Olympus 25mm f1.8, they are great lenses. They are very close to the width of field that the human eye tends to see naturally, and any distortions tend to be very, very similar to what we see ourselves. So using the 25mm does tend to be a great starting point. If I'm talking from my head though, and I'm looking for the sensible thing, I've got to also look back to what happened when I used to take photographs myself. I very, very quickly became disillusioned, shall we say, in photography to a degree, because there was all sorts of creative things I had in my head, and that standard basic kit prime lens couldn't cut it. I was always wanting to go out and buy myself a big zoom and get closer in, or to get super wide angles, which you just couldn't do with that lens. And that became a little bit of a problem in the early days because I couldn't afford them then. Nowadays, I've got more ability to buy lenses and I've got more ability to choose on the market. The market really is fantastic compared to what it used to be when I was younger. So, suggesting with my head, and whether it's a first lens or a replacement for what you've already got, my advice is to stick with what they actually give you in the kit. The 14 to 42mm kit lenses which people get, f3.5 to 5.6 normally, or even better when Lumix supply the 12 to 60 lens, the f3.5 to 5.6. They are really, really good lenses, and I think they're great. So something akin to this, which is my favourite lens, and I put it in a video. I'll stick a link above. I put it in a video very, very recently. This is the 12 to 60mm f3.5 to 5.6. That gives a really, really good range from quite a wide angle lens, a seriously wide angle lens, to a mid-range telephoto lens. You know, so you've got quite a bit of useful range on that. And people will say, well, I want to do portraits, I want to do landscapes, whatever it was that you want to do. That lens will do 95% of the jobs that you want it to. Now, I'm not talking about the specialist shooters, the ones who will want to do specialty shooting, something like bird photography or nature photography, or some of the sports photos that you get. You know, if you're going to long distance field sports or something like that, then you need to be buying the specialist stuff a little bit more to be able to get the results which are going to keep you happy. But for the majority of photographers who are coming into photography for the first time, the standard kit lens, or a slightly wider one, a slightly wider ranged one, like the 12-60, that really will do some fantastic shots, and it will probably do 95% of whatever you do, maybe more. I would still, though, recommend, as the next lens, to go out and buy that, the 25mm. And the reason I say that as well is I've just been on holiday. I had a really nice time on holiday in Cyprus, and then I also was touring around Scotland. And on both of those, I took cameras along. I took my camera along, and I used a wide-ranging zoom lens, a 14-140 on my holiday in Cyprus, and a lot of the time the 12-60 on my holiday in Scotland. But there was always places where you're going into. If you're going into older buildings, churches, for instance, like that, you want shots in there. You can't just be flooding the place with strobe lights or anything like that. You've got to, speed lights. You've got to be considerate on there. And the way to do that, I did a shot in Ripon Cathedral, a photo shoot in Ripon Cathedral recently, and the only lens I could use were my primes. I had a 17mm f1.8 prime, and I also had the 25mm f1.7. And by being able to actually open up that aperture to get more light in, to get a really small aperture number with a very, very wide aperture, that was the only thing that was allowing me to take handheld shots indoors with any sort of stability on that. So a good prime can be a real saviour for yourself. So what after that? Well, there is an alternate to the first lens, and I've just mentioned it, which is something like the 14-140 or the 14-150, whichever you go. And I'm not worried about the brands too much on this, because there are comparable brands, comparable lenses between the Olympus and the Lumix brands. So you just have to hunt. I'm talking about the lens characteristics here rather than the specific lenses. But something like one of the super zoom lenses, the 14-140, 14-150, that sort of size, is giving you an enormous amount of range. And that will take even more of the photographs that you're likely to want. If you're not going down that route, if you've already got, say, a 14-42 or a 12-60 as your kit lens, don't bother changing it for that necessarily. But look at something like the 40-150 lenses. Olympus do a fantastic one. Lumix do a very, very similar one in that sort of range. They're inexpensive. Again, they don't have the fastest apertures on them. You're still talking maximum about f4, but that's okay. For normal shooting, that's really okay. And you can get around that to an awful lot of extent by learning the techniques. Now, as I say, somebody has asked me if they want to do things like portraits or landscapes. Well, all these lenses are capable of that. If I'm going to do a lot of portrait photographs, then I would buy a specialist lens for that, which is why I use something like the Olympus 45mm f1.8. I can get a really nice shallow depth of field on that. It's a nice small lens, but being a fixed focal length, by being a prime lens, you do get better quality out of that because there's less lenses. They're not having to do so much compromises on it. And also, by getting one in the right sort of focal length is ideal. So I know if I'm going to be doing head and shoulder shots or upper torso shots, that 45mm is an ideal focal length for doing those sort of things. You don't get much in the way of facial distortions, anything like that. It's very, very accurate in what it does insofar as the image. But at the same time, it's the right sort of focal length, so you get the good distance for the person. You're not too close, you're not too far away, to be able to get the right shots for you to do those portrait shots. That wouldn't be a lens I would necessarily recommend if I was going to be doing landscapes. But the way to work out, that I found anyway, the best way to work out what to do is if you've got something like the 12-60. Now, the 12-60 is beyond the focal length that I use for the portraits, because that's about a 45mm. And if I'm doing landscapes, I'll probably be a lot more open than that. I'll probably be somewhere around about the 15-20mm range on that. But as a beginner, how do you know which focal length you want? Well, a great little tip that I was given: if you get some of the PVC type insulation tape, electrician's tape, the stuff about, it's about 20mm wide. What I tend to do on that, if I'm unsure about something, I'll get my trusty zoom, and you can see around the zoom that there's all sorts of numbers on there on the zoom itself to give you a guide as to what focal length. Now, I've said about the 25mm lens. How do you know if that's the right lens to go for you? Well, if you set that ring to 25mm and then you put a piece of tape just around the zoom, so that the zoom ring is taped up as a temporary thing around the body, so you can't move it when it's on the camera. You've effectively got a fixed focal length lens. Go out and try it. Go out and take photographs that you think may suit. Go out and try it and see what sort of results you get. Where you can't zoom. To zoom, you're going to have to physically move. You've still got all the aperture range, and if you remember, on a prime lens, you've probably got a faster lens, so you can go beyond the sort of f3.5, f4 maximum aperture on this. So you've got bigger advantage, but it will go close down to this. So a prime lens of that will do everything this will at that focal length and more. But if you tape it down, just temporarily on there, go out and use it. Don't leave it on too long because the tape leaves a residue. So, you know, but go out and use it and see what a 25mm lens will do. Next thing you can do is take it to, say, 17. It's marked as 18 on this. I can just take it in ever so slightly on that. And again, tape it up. Go off and see what you can do from a 17. And that's the way that I tend to do it. If you're doing portraits, wind it out. Wind it out on here to about 45mm. And again, tape it up. Go into your shots. Is this going to do what you want to do? You're not going to get the super creamy bokeh of the portraits because you're not getting that shallow depth of field with the open aperture. But you know what the focal length is like, and you know that it's going to be the right sort of thing. So in other words, if you've got a really zoomed in focal length, you might find that you're so far down the room from whoever you're doing your portraits of that you can't even communicate with them. Or if it's too wide, you're almost sitting on top of them. But again, remember that you're looking at the distortions as well, so you can see. If you were to take a shot on somebody with a wide angle lens, you can see as you get in there that you'll get facial distortions. The nose will appear bigger, the face will appear squashed in the sides. Doesn't look natural. Just like selfies on a phone. So you can test that out with your trusty lens before you even go and buy another one. Look at 3 lenses effectively. Very, very simple choices of lenses. If you're going down, keeping the 14 to 42 kit lens or the 12 to 60, then go down that. Next one would be to go to the next level for me would be the prime lens, because it was going to give you the opportunity to take more photos in different places. The problem is it's not particularly exciting because most people want something outside the focal length that they have. So you may, instead of getting the prime, maybe worth looking about the 40 to 150. Now I've also been asked, what about the 100 to 300 or the 100 to 400? Should I go out and buy that? Well, you can. I'm not saying don't buy any lens at all. However, for somebody who's an enjoyment photographer rather than a specialist, as I've mentioned before, when you get into the realms of those, really long telephotos, you'll probably find that you'll buy it and it'll sit in your case for 99% of the time. You'll get it out occasionally, but it'll rarely be used, and it's an expensive option to have sitting there unless that's the focal length you need for the photography that really interests you. So go canny on that one. You don't need to buy the biggest, most professional lenses, although lenses are a good investment, much better investment than bodies, because lenses tend to hold a value. They don't have such a short shelf life. A lens can be released and be on the market for 10, 15 years quite happily. A body, couple of years and it's outdated and not being upgraded. So lenses really are a good investment for you, and they hold the value second hand wise because of that. See what your kit lens is. If you don't have a kit lens already, I would suggest either one of the super zooms, the 14 to 150s, or the 12 to 60. I like the 12 to 60. It's a good size, it's a good weight. And if you go down that route as your first lens, if you already have that as a kit lens, then I would suggest going for maybe I personally would have gone for the prime, but I would totally understand if people want that extra length, extra reach of a 40 to 150. Well, I hope that's been useful for you. If it is useful, leave me comments below. If you've recently been through this sort of idea in the past as to what you need to be doing for your lenses, what did you pick? Let me know below, because it really is useful to find out and useful for other people. If you haven't subscribed already, please hit the subscribe button in the box below. And if you want to leave me a donation to keep the channel going for a cup of coffee or something, there's a PayPal link in the description as always. Oh, and I've also started up my Patreon page. So there's a few little benefits for people on that, but I'll tell you about that in a future video. But there is a Patreon link if you'd like to become a patron of the channel, and it'd be really good to see you on there. But until the next time, this is Brian James, that Micro Four Thirds guy, saying enjoy taking your photographs and keep having fun with your photography. See you next time. Bye bye. you.